Aloha and welcome to another season of MauiManao. I am your host, Alan Texera, and in this episode, we will be discussing the 27th legislature with our Maui State Senators, Senator J. Kalani English, Senator Ross Baker, and our new Lieutenant Governor, Shan Tsutsui. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. I think first off, we should begin with discussing some of Governor Abercrombie's appointments to vacant legislative positions.
Well, of course, the first one was our new Lieutenant Governor, who used to be the Senate President. He moved up and triggered several other appointment changes.
Yeah, and I think it's been an interesting time for, especially Maui politics. With my moving to the Lieutenant Governor's position, of course, our former representative from Kahului, Gil Keith Agaran, who is now the senator from Central Maui, and the new appointment of Representative Woodson into his seat. So, we have some familiar faces like myself and Senator Agaran, but of course, an opportunity for somebody like Justin Woodson to really show, some of his talents in the House level. So I think it's great. I think it's great for Maui.
And for the process junkies, how many times, this is really the first time that I'm aware of where you had a vacancy in the Lieutenant Governor's office that was then filled by the Senate President following the session that's outlined in the Constitution and that triggered all of these other kinds of events. So we've probably witnessed history that may not occur ever again. It just so happened that, all of these changes happened on Maui.
And for us, I think it bodes well for Maui.
Yes.
Because it put, Shan in the Lieutenant Governor's seat, which means that he's now the administration. So, he understands a lot of the things that we were dealing with on the legislative side. And now going to the administration side, he's been really good at helping us to sort of reconcile some of these differences. One of the most important things, I think, out of all of this is that we get an office on Maui for the Lieutenant Governor.
Right, and one of the things I think was really important in me accepting the position of the Lieutenant Governor was to still be connected to not only Maui but also the other neighbor islands and really show the state that we are concerned about not only the issues and the concerns here on Oahu, but definitely at other parts of the state. And so, with the governor's blessing, we are establishing a new office on Maui, Office of the Lieutenant Governor's office there. But it's going to be more than just that. I think part of what's going to be important is that we're going to have spaces that the legislature, that our legislators, especially from the neighbor islands, can hopefully utilize back in their own home districts. I think it still surprises a lot of people when we tell them that we really don't have offices back home. And so a lot of the meetings that we do end up being at either at their place of business, which I don't think is always appropriate, or at like a community place like Starbucks or at a coffee shop or something. And so I think this will provide us an opportunity to have a formal place to meet. And we're going to try to use technology like the Senate is implementing now in terms of having video conferencing, and so hopefully it'll connect neighbor islands to Oahu even better.
It's really going to, I think, work out really well for us to have Shan in this position because he does understand some of the issues and concerns that the legislature has, and he adds another voice to the administration to let them sort of get a better sense of the connection that the legislature has to the constituents back home and some of the issues that they're facing.
So, with this process, with the appointments and all of that, the timing of it was just before we're going to start the legislature. So, there was, obviously there was an urgency to get the seats all filled, but in the Senate, it caused what we call a reorganization because, of course, our Senate President now became the Lieutenant Governor. So we had to look at, okay, who's going to be the next president, how we're going to deal with the committees because we have different people coming in. And I think we acted, very quickly with the understanding that if we don't do this quickly, we'll be in disarray. Mm-hmm. And just because we're just about ready to start. So when Gil came into the Senate, he was already slotted in which committees he would have. And he's been, our blessing too, because his years of experience on the administration side, and then in the House, he comes in not from ground zero. He comes in knowing how the system works. And so he just jumps right in and has been working really hard with us for all of Maui and for the state of Hawaii.
Since we were discussing reorganization in the Senate, can we bring up some of the other changes that occurred? Were there committee chair changes or anything of that nature?
Well, our new Senate president was the vice president, and she chaired the Committee on Tourism. And so as to sort of not upset all of the apple cart and then have people wanting to make wholesale changes after all of the committees had been set, all of the rooms had been assigned, we chose to combine the Committee on Hawaiian Affairs with the Committee on Tourism. And so, we had one chair for Hawaiian Affairs, and then Gil came in to be the vice chair of that committee. So by making that consolidation and then sort of moving some of our leadership positions up. So our new vice president is Senator Kochi from Kauai.
Okay.
And he had been the caucus leader, and in the past, the vice president had done that task, so we were able to consolidate that, and there was really the minorest amount of disruption with the Senate. We had a few offices that had to move, but other than that, we were able to hit the ground running, and I really think it made for a very smooth transition, and the Senate seems to be working pretty well together.
Yeah, and that was the main thing, is that, we did a quick and smooth transition and then got back to work. And when we finished, then now that Gil moved up to the Senate, they had to go through the exact same process in the House. And the House was, a different organizational story, but, by filling that seat, his voice was included in the whole organization and in opening days. So, we managed to get everybody in place, and the legislature took off, and we started going right into work.
Yeah, and another reason why that was important was, towards the end of December and early January, I attended a lot of the cabinet meetings as well as some of the retreats with the different department heads. And, knowing that the House wouldn't have their organization set till close to opening day or even on opening day, which happened this year, it was important for our directors and with the governor's packages and administrative bills to be able to work with some of the senators ahead of time. And so because they were able to organize quickly, we didn't lose a whole lot of time, and we felt very comfortable from the fifth floor knowing that a lot of the measures were being worked on, and that the senators and the department heads were starting to collaborate and make sure they make adjustments to whatever proposals were coming down. So it was really important, because as we all know, once session begins, everything happens at light speed. So we were pleased to see that too.
If we can talk about session for a little bit, we are roughly halfway through the 2013 session. Can you explain some of the legislative process to this point? I imagine it can be confusing to outsiders.
Well,
Sure.
and it's also confusing, maybe not confusing is the right word, maybe it's a little bit, it's different because we have some freshman senators that have come in, and we also have some freshman members in the House. So, there's a specific language that's used in legislation that's a shorthand, and we're finding that we have to actually stop and explain the process more to our new people, which is how it should be, so they understand what it is, so they can get up to speed. So, I think what I've discovered in this session is that things that we take for granted, that, okay, we're going to do a defective date, we have to explain that a defective date means that this bill is not going to go into effect in June 30th, 2050, but it's to force the bill to come back for a conference. So whatever the other body does, the House or the Senate, to that bill, you have to sit down for a conference. It's a way of ensuring that you have one last discussion. Mm-hmm. But for us, it's a shorthand. And then I realized, that some of our freshmen were asking about this. Then I realized that many people at home were also asking the same question. Likewise, when we, certain language that we use is very specific, and if you're reading it in plain English, it means one thing, and in legislative language, it has a very specific meaning. So, it's sort of like reviewing all of our process with our new members. Sometimes it slows us down, but other times it makes us, really have to consider each step one at a time, which has been a good exercise.
Well, and the other thing too is the Senate has always tried to be very open and transparent. We post the first hearing for 72 hours. Some of us have the luxury of posting it for a longer period of time, because we want to make sure that people have an opportunity on some of these very complicated bills to really weigh in. And occasionally you get caught up and you think you have everything that's met the deadline, and you find out, oops, we're short a title, and so you have to use a short form, and so you post that with a proposed SD. It goes down to the floor, it comes back to the committee, and then you hold a hearing. And I know it's very, very confusing, and people go, well, you know, you're not doing it properly, but you are according to the rules and the procedures. And then we have some folks who think that it's important to, you know, combine measures, and so some people get offended at that because they're saying, oh, well, you're gutting and replacing. No, you're not. You're really amending it. But it's a way of trying to make sure that as many ideas as possible get on the table, and we want to make sure that everybody has as long an opportunity to look at the bill, give us their ideas, because the last thing you want is you think you have a bill in good shape and some opposition comes out from left field because they just found out about it. Or they wait till the end of session when it's been through 7 or 8 hearings and say, oh, I didn't know. So we're really trying to get the effort out, and the Senate is doing some interesting things too to try to make that happen.
Our paperless initiative, you know, and our online initiative, I mean, all of this stuff is very innovative. You know, most people don't realize that the senators get the information the same time that the public does. And, you know, so because we all get it electronic, because we're paperless. So when it goes online and we get it, it's the exact same time that the public gets it. And that's why it's important. You know, I've had some people say, why you guys want the testimony 24 hours in advance? Well, we need to get it online, but then it gives us the time to actually read the testimony. And then we can take it into consideration, because if they come to the hearing and pass it to us, it's very difficult to absorb what they're trying to say. We also have a new video conferencing technologies that were put in. So we have 3 committees that are using video conferencing, and it's a test to see how it works. But basically now, if you're on a neighbor island, or if you're somewhere on, you know, a remote area, you can't get to the building, through these committees you can use the technologies to participate. So the Senate has been trying to be as open and as transparent as possible. In fact, that's why we have the rules about you know, if you use a short form bill, and to translate this, a short form bill means it's a bill with a title and nothing inside. So you use the title because, as Roz said, if you have something that comes through that, you know, we need to put in.
Or you find you've got a defective title, you've got to have some other vehicle to use.
You can use that, and you put the body of the bill into it, but then we vote on it's a procedural vote. We vote to put that body into this bill, then it goes back to the Senate floor, and it gets a referral based on what's in the bill. So, you know, we've had to explain this to people that, no, this is purely procedural, and it's because we want to be transparent that we go through this process so that everybody knows, okay, this bill now has this body, and it got re-referred to the correct committees, and now we can talk about the contents.
You know, the other thing that the Senate is doing this time of year is we're already having confirmation hearings for many of the boards and commissions nominees that the governor has sent down to us. I just held 2 days worth of hearings on, I think it was about 22 or 23 nominees that came down for all kinds of boards, for, you know, the Cable TV Advisory Board, for the licensing of vehicle repair licensing board, and the contractors and nurses and psychologists and those kinds of things. And I have to say that I've been very impressed with the quality of the nominees that governor is sending down to us, both for the licensee members like the docs or the nurses, but as well as the public members. I mean, we have some exceptional professionals in our community that are giving of their time to serve on these very important professional and vocational licensing boards, because our professions wouldn't be able to you know, get their licenses, make sure that the public is well served and consumers are being protected without members willing to give up, you know, a couple of hours of their time every month sometimes to serve on these boards.
Excellent. Excuse me. Actually, talking about this sounds like it could help this Maui office that you were going to have on Maui video teleconferencing.
You know, I think one of the things that I want to focus on, with the Maui office is also using this as kind of like a pilot and use it as an experiment to try to see if we can create greater efficiencies, greater participation. Once I think the office is up and running, I think we're definitely going to want to provide teleconferencing capabilities. I think it'll provide opportunities for Senator Baker, Senator English, and myself, as well as our representatives, to conduct meetings from Maui to maybe our colleagues here, department heads, or even our staff. And so, those are the types of things I think it's going to be important as we move forward, that we want to be able to try to eliminate that barrier of the water that separates many of our islands, and try to provide greater connectivity. And so, it's through technology that I believe we can do this. And I think the first step, as the senators have spoken about, is to allow neighbor island individuals to testify on measures that are important to them without having to jump in a car and jump on a plane and jump in a cab and spend an entire day here to testify for 15 minutes in front of a committee. And so, and it's not just a time barrier, but obviously there's a big cost element involved. And so, in many cases, as Senator Baker just mentioned about the boards and commissions, we do get a lot of the board and commissioners, the nominees, come in from Oahu to sit in before the committees and testify and provide, their outlook or vision statements. But in many cases, you'll find that the neighbor island residents aren't able to do that because it's a volunteer position. There's no funding to provide them with that opportunity to come here unless they pay for it out of their own pockets. So, we're going to work on this, and this is really important. And I think hopefully the Maui office will be the first step, and I think a lot of good things to come.
Well, one of the young women that we confirmed in public safety the other day to the Veterans Advisory Committee is a veteran on Maui, one of the women veterans, Chelsea Fernandez. And she had been participating, she was an interim appointee to the board, and she'd been participating by teleconference. And I thought, what a great way. She's a young woman, has a family, and this allows her to fully participate, and hopefully using the video conferencing that will be set up in the Lieutenant Governor's office will open that opportunity up for more, because there are not a lot of places that you can go on Maui with video conferencing capability to connect into state government.
Technology.
Isn't it amazing?
If we may, can we speak a little about legislation? Are there any pieces of legislation that is particularly important for you to become law this year? Anyone?
Well, there's a controversial measure that the Senate is moving along that I think is going to be very important for neighbor island health care. And that's the enabling legislation that would continue the due diligence to see whether it is a good fit between Banner's interest in coming in to take over operations for Maui Memorial and the Maui Region hospitals, the East Hawaii region and the West Hawaii region. That's Senate Bill 1306. And we're moving it forward to the House. I think this is something we know that the current system of status quo is not going to be useful. It's not sustainable. Healthcare inflation is very high, and yet we want to maintain really high quality and a lot of good services. So this is one mechanism to do that. So I'm hoping that we can keep that due diligence going and the dialogue and the conversation between the employees and Banner and HHSC and the community.
And I have a couple of bills. I mean, they're not the sexy bills, but it's really important ones. One is reauthorizing the harbor's improvements. About 6 years ago, the legislature passed the Harbor's Improvement Program, and there was a lot of money for each harbor that was authorized. It means that the department could float bonds to fund these. So the authorization expired this year, which means that we need to reauthorize pretty close to $1 billion worth of bonds for Kahului Harbor, for Hilo Harbor, for Honolulu Harbor, all of the main harbors in Hawaii. So the bill's moving, and it's a lot of money, but it's not cash. It's the ability to float the bonds when they're ready to go in. So because these projects are so vital to Hawaii, we have to make sure that the funding mechanism is in place and is there when they're ready to go ahead. I remember the projections when we first passed this. That was when the economy was doing pretty well, that we were just at the point of having ships stacked up outside of the harbor waiting to offload. And if that happened, we would have seen prices of goods skyrocket. immediately. So we had a pressing issue. The recession and the slowed economic times have actually given us a little bit of time to get this infrastructure in. And I'm trying to keep the pressure on, saying, even though the ships aren't stacked up yet, we still have to go in and put in the infrastructure. There's some other bills that went through your committee. I think was it the credit card surcharge?
Mm-hmm.
So I had a bill. I think we all signed it.
Yes, to
So
prohibit it. Yeah.
to prohibit this practice of credit card companies or businesses that use credit cards. They now have the ability to charge you a surcharge if they wish. So we want to prohibit that, so that if you go to a business and use a credit card, they don't say, oh, by the way, it's 3% more on top of that. And then maybe some others, the zombie title ones.
Yes, we have a few consumer protection items that relate to some of the bad foreclosure practices. But I have to say that some of the reforms that the federal government has done that we are implementing, as well as the settlement that the attorneys general across the 50 states struck with the big five, the bad five, I should say, lenders, Chase and Wells Fargo and Ally and those folks, have really brought some reforms, and our consumers in Hawaii to date since the settlement have realized over $160 million worth of loan modifications, refinancing, or other kinds of consumer relief. So we know that people are still hurting out there, and we're still trying to move through some additional reforms that will help them. But at least some of the things that we put into place last year are starting to work, and our consumers are seeing relief. Wow.
Well, we have about 4 minutes left or so. We can talk about something else, or you guys want to continue talking about bills?
Well, let's look at some general things. Hawaiian Air has announced that they're going to do a new Ohana Air, which is, I think the direct result of the pressure from the legislature and from the governor on them to say, you need to service Hawaii. You need to service all of our airports, our remote airports, as well as the main hubs. We have Alaska Airlines looking at coming in, looking at doing a full fleet like Hawaiian, and also looking at doing a full fleet of commuter flights to all of the neighbor islands. So, we may have some really good competition very soon in Hawaii in the airlines. And so there's some good things, around the corner. And I think the governor's done a really good job at putting pressure on all the airlines to step up their service to the neighbor islands and to the remote areas.
And I've been really pleased with the ability to collaborate with the administration on making sure that the Lahaina bypass is constructed. We're just waiting for some final paperwork, I think, before we can open that. But when we had tsunami damage in Lahaina Harbor, they worked with the Corps of Engineers. We were very fortunate to be able to work with Senator Inouye's office at the time to make sure that those permits were okay, and we could go and do the dredging, and just happened to be able to dredge Mala Wharf at the same time. It was really awesome. And one of the projects that I'm still looking forward to, Governor has included in his budget, is the funding for construction of Kihei High School. The kids in Kihei have to go over to Maui High, and they don't get an opportunity to participate in after-school programs as much because there's just not transportation unless they're driving their own car. And I know that some of our colleagues are a little nervous about that because it's $130 million, but it's a design-build project. It will save the state of Hawaii over $22 million by doing it design-build. And that's almost enough for another elementary school, which we have places on Maui that need elementary schools as well. So I'm hoping that we can persuade our House colleagues and our Senate colleagues to leave that in the final budget. So when we have our MauiManao later on in the year, hopefully we'll have some success to report.
And then, just very quickly, with Mr. Ellison buying the island of Lanai, that island is doing a very wonderful turnaround.
Yes.
He's invested a lot of resources, very different attitude and very different style. And you can just see the relief on people's face on the island. And, there's a very positive, vibrant, healthy feel coming out of Lanai now. I just announced yesterday that he bought Island Air, and that gives them stability to Island Air and maybe makes them a real competitor than going out to the different islands. But for Lanai, I mean, we were very concerned about the collapse scenario happening there, and so with the new ownership, the ideas coming in, I think that Lanai is well on its way to a very, very bright future.
Excellent. We have about 2 minutes left.
Well, I guess in closing, I would just like to say, first of all, I kind of felt like a senator again today. Back with my two colleagues here, and I know this is kind of a transition. I am a kind of a fill-in for Senator Agaran, who's back in the district today, and and I'm sure as we move forward, that our new team will definitely represent Maui probably even better than they have over the last 10 years. It's been an honor for me to be side by side with Senator Baker in English over the last 10 years, and hopefully in my new role and my capacity, then we can further expand the number of good things that we do, not only for Maui but for the rest of the state. And so as the two senators mentioned, a number of projects that are there on the books and that we need to get funded, including Ki'i High School. I certainly look at my role as part of the administrative team to make sure that once those funds have been approved and authorized by the legislature, that we move expeditiously to make sure that the funds get released and that the projects get moving right away.
That's a real Maui team. You guys can
Yes.
follow it through to the
Absolutely.
conclusion. Thank you so much for joining us again today. We will have another Maui Manao later this season. But thank you very much. Aloha and mahalo.
Thank you. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Alan.
Thanks.